Well, hey, I'm Rebecca Folks, happy homemaker, mom to 4 busy kids, and online entrepreneur. I've spent over a decade in this space working with high-achieving, high-performing women who carry the weight of juggling all the things. After many ups and downs of creating balance between home life, work life, and a million kid activities too, I learned how to slow down to actually accomplish more of the important things. I believe in all the to-doing, there are deep spaces in women's hearts that are sacred to us. Conviction in our identity, hospitality around our tables, and that quiet strength that only comes when we lay our head down at night, confident we're doing a good job where it matters most. Consider this a melting pot of wisdom learned over the years. From homemaking and wellness to influencing and marketing, we're diving into the topics that have created more peace, more joy, and in the end, more margin in my business and my life. Welcome to Wide Open Spaces. Well, welcome back. I am having so much fun with these conversations regarding hospitality. And while there are some practices that may feel intimidating or big, there are others that are just examples of everyday hospitality that we can put into practice and love on the people around us. And today's guest, Julie Majors, has some really great insights on just how to do that. She tells a lot of stories about growing up and living in different places and moving a lot, and how this has been something that she's been able to put into practice. You're going to want to follow her on Instagram. It's just julie.majors.kentucky. And she is someone that has been a mentor to me, someone that has been just an example of, honestly, I was telling a friend the other day, if I had to kind of pick an archetype of someone that I know that embodies the qualities of a Proverbs 31 woman, it is Julie Majors. She is excellent in seriously every area. And the area of everyday hospitality is just one more way that she has been aspirational and inspirational to me. And I think you're going to pick up some really great, tangible, practical ways that we can practice hospitality. Well, welcome, Julie. I am so excited to have you on the podcast this morning. When I first started thinking about hospitality, someone that exhibits everyday hospitality, just every time that I go into her house or I'm on the phone with her or anything, is Julie. And so while there's so many things you could do to fancify hosting and this, that, and the other, what I think gives the biggest impact and really holds the most significance is just everyday hospitality. And so I'm so excited about this conversation with Julie today.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. That means a lot coming from you, because when I think of you, I think it's the real. Rebecca is a real deal. I just love you.
I'm just going to receive that. That's so nice.
Okay,
Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
Yep.
So if we just jumped into it, and if we're kind of under this umbrella of hospitality, what does hospitality mean to you? If you're thinking, when you hear that word, what does that bring up for you?
Yeah, I think it's helping someone else feel welcomed in your home. It's not, and maybe you discussed this with other people, it's not so much, hey, showing off my stuff and my food and my house and my whatever. It's really helping somebody to feel loved. And that's what I want people to feel when they come in my home, is love.
Yes, I love that. And I feel like another reason I wanted to even talk to Julie today is because I think some of the things that she does so practically, when you hear those, it makes you go, oh, I can do that. And that means something to people. And I can see where I could, or maybe I hope it brings someone to your mind, or something that you could be doing in a way that would be serving and loving and blessing people. And so I'm excited for that in our conversation. I feel like so many of the things when I talk to different people about hospitality starts with kind of what they've experienced and kind of maybe what hospitality looked like for them. So what did it look like for you even growing up? Do you have it did you have your mom or a grandmother or people in your church, or what did hospitality what did that look like for you?
Well, you need to know I grew up on a farm in rural Kentucky, and I I dreamed of having lots of people over all the time. And I would describe myself as an extrovert, and I get energy from people. Now that I'm a little older, I probably lean towards introvert and want more alone time because I have little people. But growing up on a farm, I just wanted nothing more than just have my friends to come over all the time. My mom had like a formal dining room and formal china, but we never used it, not even at Thanksgiving or Christmas. Maybe at Thanksgiving or Christmas, but because it had to be hand washed, nobody wanted to do that after a big meal. So we didn't. So I remember in high school inviting some of my friends over and using the fine china and having everybody bring a dish. And yeah, I loved it. So my parents didn't so much invite people over their age, but in high school, they did let us have parties and let people come over. And I just loved that. But when I was younger, I thought whenever I get my own house, I'm going to have people in it all the time.
And you do. And you do.
Well, I try. We go through seasons of feeling like we've got the margin and other seasons of feeling like we need rest. So there's
and that too. It's an outpouring. It's definitely an outpouring. Yeah. So when you you grew up and you got married, and then what did that look like? Were you kind of hosting when you were single, or do you feel like maybe kind of hospitality kicked in more as a young married, or what did that look like?
Right. Well, so I got married shortly after I graduated from college, and my husband and I went immediately into campus ministry on college campuses. And so it was very natural to have college students over. And for those that are living in the dorms or even living with their parents still, they delighted in coming over to our house. And I would describe my decorating style as early attic, late basement. So there's been times when I've really felt embarrassed of what my house looks like. Like I really long for pretty things, but financially it's just not happened. And so I got over that real quick in our married life. Like, what does my house look like? But when we were first married, we lived in this Victorian home. We lived in Louisville, and beautiful house on the outside. On the inside, there were bats and squirrel. I could tell crazy stories. Anyway, one of the things I love about that time in that house is, so if you can imagine like a 3-story Victorian home, we were in the attic part. And I know my parents were like, this girl has gone into the ministry and she's living in an attic. But on the second floor was another young couple that didn't have kids. And so we would just like go up and down the stairs.
Subdivided. So everyone
is
it
was subdivided.
You've got different Okay. I'm tracking. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. So you were living with many other couples or families all in one home.
No, it was subdivided. We have different doors, and like you go up a set of stairs to my door, and our doors were right together, but as soon as you went in our door, it was like a switchback stairs.
It was completely separate. Okay.
Completely separate. Thank you for that clarification. Anyway, I just loved, it was like living in the dorms again, but it was co-ed this time. You know, I was married and she was married, and our husbands got along. Well, not just got along. We just had a lot of fun together.
I love it. Yes. That sounds hospitality. Fun. Yes.
Yeah. Hospitality in that season was not just inviting college students over, but it was, 8:00 at night, 10:00 at night, hanging out with another young married couple. And it was like being at camp or something. I don't know. It was just really, really, really fun. Then from there, we moved to Little Rock, and that's how I know you, was living in Little Rock. And we owned a house for the first time and lived in a neighborhood. And this neighborhood was right up the hill from Kohl's. Do you know where that Parkway Place was? The neighborhood that we lived in. And I was just so excited to finally meet some more friends. But I was just realizing, okay, these are not all college students. They're not all young marrieds. Like, I was really struggling to meet friends and make friends. But actually, once we got to know people on the street, we lived on the corner, so we knew there's 2 streets. We could throw a stone, metaphorically, to about 8 young couples, which is a lot when you think about, the what's the word I'm looking for? The people that live around your neighborhood. There's a word for that.
The community, the neighborhood.
Yeah. Anyway, so we wanting to meet people, and we really wanted to have Bible studies, but we were thinking like that might feel weird for meeting somebody the first time, say, hey, you want to come to Bible study in my house? So we thought, what else could we do? We hosted a Survivor night at our house. Like, so Survivor, the TV show, was brand new, and we just said, hey, come to our house and watch this show. that was super fun. And none of us
That
had
is
kids
so
yet.
fun. Yes.
And so, yeah, we did that. Okay, but I want to stop and tell a story on myself here, because often you think of hospitality and food together, right? And maybe,
I do. Yes.
yeah.
Totally synonymous, especially in the South. But yes, anywhere.
Right.
Yes.
So I can't remember if I made food every time or not, but I do remember there was at least one couple that we had over from that group, and I made a vegetarian lasagna. Now, I'd made the lasagna a few weeks or months prior and froze it. And I gave one away to another couple on our street that had had a baby. And then I froze the one that then we didn't eat. So I pull it out a couple weeks later. We have it over for friends, and we sit down to eat, and I put it in my mouth and I spat it out immediately. And my husband was like, what? And I'm like, this tastes terrible. It tasted like the worst vitamins you've ever tasted in your entire life. And I was like, what in the world has gone wrong with this? And so I'm like running my mind, like, what did I do different? And and then I was like, oh, I gave one of these away to the girl down the street. Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I don't know exactly what happened, but my mom had given me the zucchini and squash that I'd used in that. And so I don't know if like the end of the season, they just became really bitter or what. But anyway, like the next day I went down to that friend immediately and said, you remember that lasagna I gave you after your baby was born? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, did it taste terrible? And she was like, yeah, we threw it away.
Oh, no.
I'm like, why did you tell me? Yeah.
Oh,
She's like,
no.
well, I wasn't going to tell you that. So anyway, if you have food, it doesn't have to be fantastic food. It could be gross food. Anyway, we pivoted, and I don't know, I made spaghetti or something, that you can make super quick and you have in your pantry all the time. But I was surely embarrassed, not just for the people that were at my house, but for the lasagna that I'd given away.
I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry. Well, one thing that I see you doing often is bringing food to neighbors and to people around you, whether it's elderly people, and you're just honestly sharing so often what you have. Like you've made soup, and so you're bringing it to a neighbor. And how did you know to do that?
I
What
learned
makes
that
you
from
kinda
my
think,
mom.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to know about that. So tell me how you're doing that.
So, well, my mom has always been one to, so we might not have had people in our home, but she's always been other focused, outward focused. And if we had just a little bit left over, she would put it like in a sour cream or a cottage cheese container and say, I'm going to take this to Little Miss So-and-so at the church, or I'm going to take this. There was an elderly lady that lived at the bottom of the hill where we lived, or she was always thinking about others. She is always thinking about others. And I just saw that modeled in her. And I remember as an adult, I don't know, I'd probably been married 10 or 15 years at this point, and I took a little something down to somebody on the street. And I just said, I made this and I wanted you to have it. And they were kind of like, I don't have a category for this. I mean, they didn't say that, but I could see that on their mind. Like, why are you bringing me a small portion? I'm not sick. Or I was like, I just love food, and I just wanted somebody to be excited with me about this food. And don't you want to try this? And so, yeah, I completely learned that from my mom. And it wasn't until I got that reaction when the person was like, what? Why are you bringing that? And I thought, oh, not everybody does this. It's just something my mom does.
Well, were they grateful for it? Or
oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. But their immediate reaction was...
What's that?
But their immediate reaction was maybe confused. That hadn't happened to them before. They hadn't been gifted in that way.
Yeah.
And then, but they went, oh, I kind of like this. I kind of like this.
Yes. So in fact, that makes me think of another story. As newlyweds, we were living in this neighborhood. So there's lots of newlyweds around us. And I had a baby at this point, and I was really feeling isolated and lonely, even though I lived in a city now. I wasn't on a farm, and I had people in my life. But motherhood, especially young motherhood, can bring just isolation that nothing else does. And so, this, of course, was before social media or even cell phones. I think we just had a landline that tells you how old I am. So anyway, I remember I probably took a little bowl of something down to this friend, and I knocked on her door, and she had just had a baby because our boys are about the same age. And I said, hey, I just wanted to bring you this little food. I was just thinking about you. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm really desperate for a friend. Will you be my friend? But I didn't want to say that. And she was like, oh, hi. And so I kind of like barged into her house, and I'm thinking, I want to sit down and have a glass of water with you or something. And I
and
didn't
talk.
realize until like 5 years later, she told me, Julie, you barged into my house that day. I didn't have any choice but to let you come in. And I was mortified that you saw my house the way it was. But to this day, I don't remember anything about our furniture. I do not remember anything about the state of our kitchen. I don't remember anything other than that filled a need that I had to have a person with flesh in my life. And she went on to say, I'm glad that you did barge in that day, because while I felt mortified in the moment, on the other side of it, I was really glad that you had taken the initiative to come to my door, and we're still friends today.
Connect.
We still,
Yes.
yeah, connect.
I love that. And I love the reminder that hospitality can be, I feel like not only is it synonymous hospitality with food, it typically is thought of as hosting in some way. And
Yeah.
so I think part of being hospitable and a way to just practice hospitality is to bring food to a neighbor, or to bring something to someone, or go sit with them. Maybe it's in the hospital or in their home or whatever that looks like. And that's a way to practice hospitality. And I've been the beneficiary of some of your hospitality when you're dropping off. I was having nausea or something, or a stomach bug, or maybe it was pregnancy, and you're bringing homemade ginger ale. One thing about Julie is if she brings you a meal, and just part of her story and things and her expertise is nutrition, and in non-toxic, and in just being really intentional with what we're putting in our bodies, and being able to kind of work with our bodies through nutrition. And so it's always the best ingredients, and there's so much thought that goes into it. But I love that you bring it in a lot of times. Like, it'll be in a sour cream container, or it'll be cottage cheese. Like, it's not, and it means something to me that someone took the time to put it. It's not in the presentation. It's about the people. And that's just like a gift that you've given me. I think you've brought over, even like chicken salad or something before, like just like something that was not, it's not some big, like, in like stuff that are not prepackaged, but things that are, or maybe it is prepackaged, but it's just kind of, hey, I thought of you. I wanted to bring this, and I dropped it off without thinking, oh, this has to be fancy. And I feel like that's kind of a theme in the last few times where I've been talking about hospitality on here is I just want people to break through the thought. It doesn't, I enjoy fancy. And honestly, Julie, I see you when you're hosting things in your home, in her beautiful dining room with her china and things like, and it looks beautiful. It looks beautiful.
Aww.
But I know what I love about Julie is that she has the same level of intentionality, and hey, come into my home when her kitchen's a wreck and she's got 10 vinegars that she's somehow, I don't even know what she does, making vinegars and all these kombuchas and all these things. She has the same level of attentiveness, and hey, come right in, sit at my bar, let me try this vinegar, try this like, and it makes you feel so definitely salt, so loved on. And I love that about you, Julie. And I love how you that's been instrumental in me wanting to love on other people, whether it's in my neighborhood or people going, oh, I can just drop something off, and it doesn't have to be all packaged in this way, but just the thoughtfulness behind it feels so friendly, and you feel loved. Like I cried when you brought that homemade ginger ale that time. I was like, oh my gosh, this is homemade. And it was just like, she made this ginger syrup, and then she brought like carbonated water, sparkling water that you mixed with it. And so it was homemade ginger ale, and it totally was helpful, but also just the thought behind it meant so much to me. And I think that's such a big part of hospitality is when people are talking to you and they're serving and loving, you feel cared for. You feel
and
cared
seen.
for. And I love that. And seen. Absolutely. I had a friend, and she was talking about going to a really, they lived in a really affluent area, and she and one of her children went to this party or gathering in this lady's home. She said it was the most amazing home she'd ever been in, that she was just awestruck at all of the beauty and the grandeur in the home. But she said, I felt invisible. No one talked to me. The host never came over to say, hi or welcome to my home or anything. And so she was so uncomfortable. She wanted to leave because it was just, you weren't noticed. I don't think it was a particularly large gathering. But it made you feel like, oh, is this even okay that I'm here? Where do I sit? Where do I put it gives vibes of that, being a middle schooler and you're with your tray looking for a place to sit. Like, is there a place for me here? So that's the opposite of walking into Julie Major's home.
Well,
for
something
sure.
that you said made me think of another story of when someone was hospitable to me, and she lived in another state.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember when I was rushing to bring groceries. I live my life in a rush. Sometimes I try to remind myself to slow down, but I was rushing to bring groceries into my house, and I tripped over something in my garage, and I fell and broke 3 ribs.
Yes.
Excruciating pain. And within 24 hours, a friend of mine who lived, I don't remember what state they're in the military, so she's constantly moving. I don't know what state she lived in, but she had Amazon or Whole Foods or however that works, delivered a bag of groceries to my door, just like a fun charcuterie board. And I felt so seen. Like, it was good food.
So seen. Yes.
It wasn't necessarily food for my family, but it was food that I would like. And I just thought that was so sweet. I don't remember if it brought me to tears or not, but it was so thoughtful. And it was something she could do. And it just, I've used that hack actually since.
Yes.
Since she
I've
taught
done
it to
the same. And it's delivered like that day, especially if they're in a bigger city, but Whole Foods, is connected to Amazon. So I've done that same thing. Another one was something I saw on Shark Tank one time. And I think the company, I'll put it in the show notes, is called like A Spoonful of Comfort or something like that. And it's chicken noodle soup, and it's really great ingredients. And you can send, and they ship it to the people for you. And it's a big helping, I think, at least 4 servings of soup and cookies. And you can add, it's been a couple years since I've done it, but it's like if you have a friend that's sick or you want to love on them, it's such a sweet way if they are states away or something and you want to send something nourishing and sweet, like to receive that. That's a great, I'm probably going to put in the show notes. I am going to put in the show notes it's just some everyday, really practical ideas of ways to love on people through hospitality that aren't hosting for 10 or 12 people and thinking you need floral arrangements and your china out and all these things. And so I'm so grateful for this conversation that's kind of giving more ideas on that. Another thing I wanted to ask you, Julie, because y'all are in ministry and you've lived overseas in different places. And have you noticed anything different about hospitality in just other parts of the world? Maybe when you were living in Fiji or just different places that felt different, or just other. Yeah. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that first comes to mind is I lived for 6 weeks in Israel as a college student. And I was in an apartment, and I would do my own grocery shopping. And I remember being in the grocery store. I can't remember how I started a conversation with this lady, but I'm not surprised that I did, because hello, extrovert and wanting to get to know people. And somehow through the conversation, she said, well, would you just like to come to my house for dinner? Now, before you think Julie went home with an axe murderer, she had 2 small children. I'm sure they were with her. I don't remember a whole lot because this was probably 30 years ago now, but she invited us. There was another student from my school that went with her. And that was, it was so meaningful to me. And again, I don't remember anything really about their house other than it was smaller than your average American house. It wasn't extravagant, but I just remember how I felt there, and remember thinking, when I come into contact with strangers from other countries, I want to invite them into my house. And as a result, my husband and I have befriended other international students. When we lived in Little Rock, we were involved with some international students at the university there. But just to have them in your house, to come alongside, go to birthday parties or trick-or-treating with you or whatever, cultural things that I didn't understand, that really meant a lot to me as a young woman who was not yet married. And just seeing this young mother invite me into her home and interact with her family and that sort of thing. When we lived in Fiji, I think when you said, how have I experienced hospitality different overseas? I think hospitality is generally more readily practiced in other cultures than America. And maybe it's the materialism that Americans think, well, my house needs to be perfect. My couch needs to be matching my chairs, whatever it is that people get hung up on. There just isn't that in other parts of the world. And I counted up the other day, I think I've been to 18 different countries for various ways. And I would say almost, in every single one of them, that the homes are smaller and not as extravagant. And, what if that smaller scale budget frees you up to be more hospitable. I remember being invited into the apartments of 2 Iranian friends in Little Rock, and remember thinking, if I didn't know these people, I would be afraid to be in this apartment complex because, maybe it's a little sketchy. But inside their little bitty apartments, they were offering me the best of what they had, and they had gone above and beyond with their food and making it look pretty. And I mean, that was probably the Iranian way that they, they just, if you ever look at pictures of, Mediterranean food, it usually looks really pretty and bright and colorful. And they use lots of herbs and tomatoes and all that. It puts us to shame as Americans, really. And we lived in Fiji for 6 months. And because we didn't have a car, it was a little more challenging for me to go to the grocery store or always have things on hand and to have people over. But even in that season, we really tried to invite people into our house. And looking back, I know one of the things that my husband did was he installed a pull-up bar on our carport. And so the teenage boys on the street would come over and do pull-ups. So there's no food involved in that, but they were just asking questions about American culture. And yeah, it was something to do together. And my younger kids, they were 5 and 7 when we lived there. They wanted to have a movie day. And so I popped popcorn, and the younger kids came over and watched movie inside, which was a bigger deal. I don't know why. But it was just, but to a person in Fiji, it was we were always welcome to have tea. I mean, what does tea cost you? 10 cents? It doesn't have to be extravagant or costly. But just
and your time, though, that they're putting their time on hold to say, hey, come into my space. And I feel like so many people, it feels like everywhere people are lonely, or they're looking for authenticity, or they're looking for vulnerability. And what hospitality really is doing is it's inviting people in to your life, into these sacred spaces. I mean, in your home, or that you're going into theirs. And that is what bridges the opportunity for connection, for vulnerability, for those heart conversations that so many of us are really craving. We want the depth from people, and we want to be seen, but are we willing to? I love that you said, it seems like in many of the homes that you lived in or communities, you were out inviting people in. And I remember that same thing, living in Pennsylvania and just living in a really a super small home that wasn't super conducive to hosting a lot of people at one time. But people were always at our house because we kept inviting them in, and people, they want to be included. They want to, the people, granted, not everybody, but a lot of people want to be together and are looking for those kinds of connections and relationships. And hospitality is what makes room for that. So I love that.
Also in Fiji, another thing that struck me is they're with the small houses and small spaces, a lot of people don't have chair. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of people. There are a good portion of people who don't have chairs. They have grass mats, and they'll roll out the mats and everybody sits on the floor. That's a cultural thing for sure. They sit kind of, crisscross applesauce on the floor, from elderly people to young people. Everybody sits on the floor, and it's probably good for their, posture.
And their posture.
All that. But plates and chairs do not impede Fijians from having anyone over. In fact, because they live in the middle of the Pacific and everything has to be imported, paper plates are super expensive, even for Americans there. And so what you do at a big party is you get your plate, you eat, and when you're finished, you take it back to the kitchen and you wash your plate and give it to the next person.
Well, there you go.
I mean can you see that happening in America, Rebecca?
I cannot, but I like the idea. I think my children should adopt that. I think that would make for a lot less messes. I love that you told that. I did not know that. So, is that is that in a particularly large gathering, or is that even just with a couple families?
It could be.
Okay.
But also it's not uncommon for, I remember going to a swim meet and everybody was told to bring their cup because the swim team was very mindful of of recycling, and really recycling wasn't a possibility on a small island nation like Fiji. And so what recycling meant was you just bring your cup and then you take it home with you. And that way there's not plastic left to fill up the landfill.
Totally. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but an average household might have 20 or 30 plates at their house, or, it's not uncommon to borrow something from your neighbor there. Let me borrow your 20 plates because I'm going to have 50 people over or whatever.
Okay. I'm that is.
You don't have a category.
That's so interesting. I'm looking for a different word than interesting. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. But I didn't know that was a thing, but I'm glad to know it is. So now I've got another idea. Okay. Okay. One thing I did want to ask you, because I do feel like you have people in your home all the time, and you, in different seasons, are homeschooling, and you have 3 children that all have various activities. You're a pastor's wife. You're in ministry. You have side hustles. You are cooking, not, baking a Pop-Tart, but you're like literally cooking 3 times a day. It seems like at your house. You're busy. You've got a lot going on. How do you have any kind of tips or wisdom on making space for people so that there's space to be able to have time and energy and all those things for hospitality?
I think you live and die by the plan. Maybe you've heard this. You fail to plan, or plan to fail. No, fail to plan, plan to fail. And that's right. So when I know that I'm having somebody over on Friday, I just kind of back up. What can I do on Thursday? What do I do on Wednesday? What can I do on Tuesday? Lazy Genius calls that the magic question. What can I do now to make things easier later?
Oh, I like that question. What can I do now to make things easier later? That's a great question. Well, is there anything else that we haven't talked about hospitality, or anything else that you would want to share as we kind of wrap up the conversation?
Sure. I think when people hear podcasts like this, the tendency could be to feel overwhelmed. Like, oh, I could never invite an international student into my home, or I could never go to my neighbor and ask for 10 plates or whatever. Another Lazy Genius principle is to start small. Like, what is your baby step? Maybe for you, it could be, I'm going to buy a box of popsicles the next time I'm at the store. And then I'm going to invite all the neighborhood kids over and tell them to stay out in the yard, because when they come in the house, it gets overwhelming. But I'm just going to pass out the Flavo Pops, in the yard. And that's going to be hospitality. Or maybe it's, you invite your friends at church. Hey, everybody bring your favorite box of cereal, and we're going to have a cereal dinner at my house. And I'm going to fry up a pan of bacon, or, whatever that looks like to you, whatever looks easy to you.
I love that. Yes.
Maybe you have just a little bit left over and you're going to, drop it off to a lonely, elderly neighbor, or a single neighbor, or, start small. What is one thing that you could do to think about others and help them feel seen?
I think that's precious. And it honestly kind of even reminds me of like a marketing principle that I hear sometimes, or a branding, I guess, that sometimes different is better than better. And so like when you're talking about the little cereal night and the bacon, like sometimes something unexpected and different, or just tell everyone coming over to watch Survivor or something feels different than, oh, we're coming over and I'm cooking dinner for everyone. Like that there's just kind of an element of unpredictability and fun. And hey, I wanted to think of a special way to love on y'all. So I love all those ideas. And Julie, I'm just grateful that you made time for the conversation and to just encourage people in this area, because I do think it matters. And I do think that it's something that you do with excellence. And I hope that it's inspiring to people that are listening at home.
Yes, for sure.
You just finished another episode of Wide Open Spaces. My hope is always that you felt encouraged as you listened. And if you found this valuable, will you share it with a friend today? Tag me if you do. I always love seeing your favorite takeaways. I'm so glad you were here, and I'll see you back next week. Same time, same place. See you then.